bird photos are sharp, well exposed and technically perfect, but they still feel boring and flat? Keep watching. I'm Chiara and I teach bird photography to photographers who want impactful photos, not just snapshots. Because the truth is that technical perfection doesn't create impact, storytelling does. So here's the question: are your wildlife photos telling stories? That's what we're going to find out. In today's video, I'll share what makes a photo tell a story, and then I'll give you 5 practical ways to include storytelling in your bird images. By the end, you'll have a complete toolkit to transform your photos from documentation to impactful stories. So what makes something a story versus just a beautiful image? Now, every compelling story, whether it's a novel, a movie, or a photograph, is built on 4 essential pillars: characters, plot, setting, and voice. In wildlife photography, here's how these translate. The characters, that's our birds. Each individual has personality and a role to play. Then we have the plot. That's what's happening. The action, the behavior, the moment unfolding in front of our eyes. Something needs to be happening beyond just this bird exists. Then we have the setting. That's the context, the habitat, the environment. So all the other details in the surroundings of the birds. These answer the question, where is this taking place and why does it matter? And then we have the voice. That's us, our creative decision, how we decide to capture and interpret a moment. And this is about our lens. And I'm not talking about this lens. I'm talking about your eyes. So let's see an example. In this image, we have actually multiple characters, the 2 parents and the young. We have the plot. So this is the moment the parent is feeding its chick while the other one is carrying it on its back. We have a clear setting, so we see where these birds are in the water. We have this fog, and then we have the voice. So how I framed it, how I chose to work with this scene. So what's the difference between documentation and storytelling? The thing is that documentation just captures the characters. For example, here's what a rib looks like. Storytelling captures way more elements and also adds your voice as the photographer. When you start thinking about these 4 pillars, you will stop just photographing birds because they happen to appear in front of you, and you will start to tell their stories. Now, let's go into practice because I'm going to share 5 different easy and practical ways you can incorporate storytelling in your bird images. Let's start with behavior storytelling. So this type focuses on the plot pillar. So this is where you can capture what the bird is doing, not just what it looks like. Instead of a bird just sitting there, you're showing a bird diving, a bird calling, a bird preening, a bird flying. Now, the key here is patience and observation, because you need to wait for these moments instead of just firing away the second you see a bird. So ask yourself, what is this bird doing right now? Or can I wait for this bird to do something? Now, behavior storytelling transforms your photos from here's a bird to here's what this bird's life is actually like. Then we have interaction storytelling. So this is where you multiply the characters pillar. Instead of 1 bird, you have 2 or more interacting with each other. If you want powerful stories, photograph relationships. Normally, the more characters are present in a story, the more the story is complex and compelling. And this is where the magic often happens between subjects. So a parent feeding a chick, 2 birds in a territorial dispute, a mating pair. Now, these interactions reveal the drama of bird life. So whenever there's tension, there's action, there's a story unfolding in real time. Photos with interaction create emotional connection because we all understand relationships. We see ourselves in these moments, and this can be both conflict or it can also be connection. So when you're out in the field, don't just photograph the solo bird portrait. Wait for the interaction. Wait for the moment when something happens between subjects. Now, technically, these photos are more difficult because often it is hard to manage a single subject in a shot and get it sharp, get it in the right position in the frame. So let alone 2 or even more birds. But I promise that it's worth it because they'll be so much more powerful than another bird on a stick portrait. And now, obviously, it's raining as it often does when I want to shoot video, so I need to move somewhere else. So luckily I have a porch so I can keep going. The third type of storytelling, it's what I define environment and scale storytelling. So this is more about the setting pillar, but with a twist, because it's not just where the story takes place, but also how much of that environment you choose to show. So it's also your voice. Now, too often we zoom in tight, trying to fill the frame with our bird photos, but sometimes the story isn't showing the bird within its word. First, think about the environment itself. For example, imagine a tiny bird in a vast space that tells a story about its ecosystem, about also the importance of protecting these habitats, or a bird perfectly camouflaged in reeds that shows adaptation and the incredible relationship between species and habitat. Environmental storytelling answers the question, where does this bird live? How does it use this space? What would we lose if this habitat disappeared? And the spoiler here is that we would lose birds as well, as unfortunately it's already happening. So it's not just about the bird, it's about the bird's word. But if you want to emphasize even more your voice in your photos, that's where your decisions come into place. So how much of that environment do you include? Let me tell you that sometimes making the bird small in the frame tells a much bigger and better story than filling the frame. For example, a small bird in a vast landscape that gives us the sense of solitude, but also resilience, vulnerability, strength despite size. Or let's think about using empty space intentionally. Now, negative space that gives breathing room creates contemplation, emphasizes isolation or peace. This is a compositional choice, your choice about scale and spatial relationship. And finally, another way to incorporate more of your voice in your photos is to intentionally decide about your perspective, so your physical position, because that will change the story too. Eye level creates intimacy and connection. Looking down creates vulnerability because the bird seems smaller, more fragile, whereas looking up creates power or majesty. The bird becomes larger than what it might actually be. So remember, you can have same bird in the same habitat, but completely different emotional stories based on where you position yourself. So environment storytelling is really about three questions. What habitat am I showing? How much of it do I include? And where am I positioning myself in relation to the bird? And all three shape how viewers understand the bird's place in its world, and they will feel differently when experiencing your photo. We are at type number 4, and this is all about light and colors. This is really more about your emotional toolkit, and it's one of the most powerful ways to control how viewers feel about your image. Yet for most photographers, this is not something they even think about. To show you what I mean, look at these two photos. We have the same character, but they tell completely different stories. Or these two, same character, same composition, different emotional language. And why? That's because the light, the weather condition, and colors were different. These three elements are often connected, but let's analyze each individual one, starting with light quality. Everyone knows that morning light, which is often called the golden hour or the late sunset, creates warmth, that sense of nostalgia, even magic. If we think about soft overcast light, we have more a sense of calm and intimacy. If we have harsh directional light with deep shadows, that creates drama and tension. If we go for backlight, that creates mystery. Here you clearly see how different light can really tell very different stories. The other ingredient that goes hand in hand with light is obviously atmospheric conditions, because beyond light quality, weather conditions really add another emotional layer to your story. Let's think about fog. Fog creates feeling of mystery, isolation, quietness, like almost witnesses something hidden that most people never seen. If we think about a stormy sky, like with clouds, we have tension, drama, maybe the harshness of survival, and they make you feel more the struggle of being a bird. And then finally, we have colors. Obviously, if we think back at golden hour, that will give you those warm oranges and yellows that really creates a feeling of warmth and comfort. If we take photos during the blue hour, that we have the cool blues evoke more calm, contemplation, sometimes melancholy. Overcast conditions tend to mute colors into more subtle ones and soft tones. Now, I want to emphasize that it's not just about the bird color, it's also about the colors that we have in the surroundings, so in the background. For example, a bird against vibrant autumn leaves tells us a story, so we have that sense of time. The same bird against the winter snow tells a story of survival and resilience. But when it comes to colors, here's also where your voice as a photographer comes in, because remember, you can also shape colors in post-processing. So for example, you can enhance the warmth to amplify that hopeful feeling. You can push towards cooler tones to create more distance or isolation, or you can desaturate for a quieter, more contemplative mood. So color becomes a two-part storytelling tool, because first we have the colors that nature gives us through light, then your creative choices in how you interpret and enhance or modify those colors, and now both are part of your emotional language. What I want you to take away from this is that you should stop thinking about good light and bad light and start thinking about emotional light and how you can use whatever light you have to tell a story. If you have harsh midday sun, that's not bad, that's drama and intensity, that's a story. If you have a gray overcast day, that's not pouring, that's intimacy and quiet contemplation, which is actually the most common feeling, I would say, for people who do wildlife photography and appreciate this type of photography. If you have fog, that's not frustrating, although I know that shooting in low light is not easy. I know that you wished you had more light, but like how much mystery and atmosphere that creates. So before you press the shutter, just ask yourself, what emotion is available here? What emotion am I feeling? What emotion do I want the viewers to feel? And how can I use this light, this weather, these colors? Remember, all of this really is the backbones of your emotional language. Master these and you control the mood of every image you create, and you will have a really diversified portfolio. And we arrived to type number 5, which is all about conservation storytelling. So this is where your photos don't just show wildlife, but they actually advocate for it. This is really about showing the challenges wildlife faces, reveal the ways they are adapting to a changing world, or reveal the ways we are actually destroying their habitats. So these photos have purpose beyond aesthetic. So this is another storytelling layer. So maybe you photograph a bird in a declining habitat, or document successful nest protection effort, or show the impact of pollution or climate change, or celebrate successful reintroduction or recovery stories. The thing is that your camera can definitely be more than a tool for pretty pictures. It can also be a voice for species that need one. We got to the end of the video. First, we saw the 4 pillars of storytelling: character, plot, context, and voice. And we also explored 5 ways to incorporate storytelling in your bird photos. First, behavior, showing what birds do; interaction, capturing relationships and moments between subjects; environment, so revealing habitat and context; light and mood, so using emotional language through lighting; and then conservation, giving your photos purpose. Now, before we close up, I also want to share 3 important things. The first one is that technical perfection is not the goal. Those perfectly sharp, in focus, perfectly exposed birds on a perch shots that you see everywhere, especially on social media. I really think that what separates photographers who stay stuck taking documentation photos like those one from those who become storytellers is really asking, what story am I telling? Not, are my settings perfect, or am I close enough to this bird? The second thing is that you don't need to master all the 5 storytelling types, but knowing they exist just give you options. So when you're stuck in a creative rut, when you're maybe bored with portraits, you now have a roadmap and you can intentionally pursue a different type of story. There's something extremely important, is that your gear doesn't tell stories. Only you can tell stories. So please let go of that obsession about gear, because I can promise you, you can tell stories no matter the gear you have. So as usual, I want my videos to be always very practical. So I'm also leaving a challenge for those of you who want to do something hands-on. I want you to look back at your last 10-20 photos you're proud of and ask yourself, what stories are they telling? And are they saying, I saw a bird and took a photo of it, or are they saying something deeper about the moment, that species, that experience? And more importantly, which of these 5 storytelling types are you not using at all? Drop a comment and let me know. And my advice is for you to go out and experiment exactly with that type that you've never tried. Remember, sharp and in focus doesn't mean impactful, and documentation doesn't mean storytelling. What you need is to have stories in your photos. So the question isn't what bird should I photograph today, the question is what story do I want to tell. And if you found this helpful, I really appreciate if you could leave a thumbs up, and especially if you want to subscribe, because I share practical bird photography tips that go beyond gear every week. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. And I wish you find thousands of stories in your next sessions.